It was just a year and a half ago that Governor Pritzker was trying to bully the state into passing the largest tax increase in Illinois history and was threatening huge program cuts if it didn't pass. Thankfully, the voters didn't believe him then, and they shouldn't believe him now. Instead, last year, he raised taxes on businesses and tried to cut a tuition program for low-income school children, going back on previous bipartisan agreements that he made in 2019. He then placed unnecessary restrictions on our small businesses and has saddled them with the burden of paying back the bulk of the unemployment trust fund, which is daily accruing interest. This budget is nothing more than an election year gimmick that does nothing to address the structural issues that have held Illinois back for decades. Our state revenues are decreasing while there is $2.5 billion in new spending. He hasn't addressed what's caused the state's massive pension liability to continue, and he is proposing a one-time so-called property tax relief without any structural reforms to address the root problem. This is not a long-term solution. Now, I'm in favor of providing relief for taxpayers. That's why I filed HB 5215 last week to freeze the automatic gas tax increase for 2 years. I also filed HB 4834, which will allow communities to take the power back and go to referendum to freeze their property taxes. Let's get together. Let's talk about living within our means. Let's talk about structural spending reforms. Let's talk about efficient and effective government. Let's talk about real reforms that encourage business development and job creation, and real reforms that encourage families to stay. Instead of just borrowing and throwing one-time federal funds at a problem and calling yourself a winner. Despite everything the governor said today, we still have the highest overall tax burden in the country. Don't fall for this election year gimmick.
This is State Representative Martin McLaughlin from the 52nd District. This is my take on the governor's budget address. A grim outlook today in Illinois as I listened to the governor weave a finely polished and crafted fairy tale of financial stability and balanced budgets. I couldn't help but think about the claim that we have met our pension payment obligations once again. Pritzker is so proud of making the absolute bare bones minimum payment on our pension liabilities. It's a bit like someone with a $30,000 credit card balance making a $500 minimum annual payment claiming everything's okay. Unfortunately, everything is not okay. Rampant inflation under Pritzker has caused state revenues to increase through higher and higher prices, crushing working families. Everything they pay for, everything costs more. Gas, heating, medicine, food, everything has a higher price, and subsequently, the taxes that working families pay have gone up significantly. Spending is outpacing revenues once again in this budget, and our kids are on the hook for the state's shortfalls. That's if they choose to and can afford to stay here in Illinois. Our state's credit rating is still at the lowest in the nation and barely above junk. The only reason it moved up one notch last year, to great fanfare from the governor's office, was due to Illinois receiving billions in federal bailout money, not fiscal reforms which are desperately needed. When that federal spigot is shut off and the free financial fairy dust is no longer sprinkled across Illinois, magically improving our bottom line, where do we think our state will be then? Without significant spending reforms, we are in trouble. The only way to get us back on track is to acknowledge the state has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Now, with an election coming up, we hear loud promises from the governor's corner that JB will put his thumb in a pie and pull out a magic plum called family tax relief. Call me a cynic, but maybe it's because there's a gubernatorial election coming up. What's the only solution to our state's woes? Fire these maestros of fiscal malfeasance by voting the bums out of office. We must elect fiscally responsible leaders who recognize where we are on our property taxes, that we have a spending addiction, and that we need better public safety, and we need to close our pension shortfalls. We must support candidates who pledge to reform spending, control property taxes, improve public safety, and make full pension payments. Once these people are elected, hold them accountable, or we won't live in Illinois so happily ever after. Thank you.
Here's how you can sum up the governor's budget address. Illinois is the best. Just ignore why people are fleeing more than any other state. He said, I got Illinois a bond upgrade by moving us from one notch above junk to two. He says he loves small business, but devastates them with new taxes and regulatory rules if he hasn't shut them down completely. He loves police, but he's signed laws that bludgeon the profession. He says he wants parents to have childcare, but his administrative rules have made our working parents' lives miserable and are actually causing daycares to close. He says he loves schools, but he fought a scholarship program to get poor kids into better ones. He says he'll handle permanent inflation with a one-time only, poll-tested and consultant-approved tax rebate. He says he wants tax relief, but he's only temporarily halting a scheduled tax increase. He says he wants our state to run well, but on his watch, we've had massive unemployment fraud, dead veterans at the state facilities in LaSalle, contempt of 3 court orders because kids were wrongly locked up in psych wards, and our healthcare system is a mess. There's a reason why when I ask Democrats in my district what they think about all the governor's TV budget commercials, they roll their eyes. They know he isn't honest. They know he isn't credible. And that's because you don't solve problems by blindly throwing more money at them. And a real balanced budget doesn't need a federal bailout. Illinois needs real-world structural reform. The governor's signature proposal in this area, a constitutional tax amendment, when he put that to the entire state, we voted no, because we know better than to take the governor at his word. So ultimately, let's be honest. Governor, don't paint a rosy state of the state that people can see right through. Don't pander to your political activist class, whose ideas aren't working nationally and aren't working locally. Instead, focus on Government 101. Government 101 means you apply common sense to keep your streets safe, ensure schools are actually teaching our kids, you keep the state out of local issues, and if you want to call a budget balanced, you simply can't spend more than what your state pays in. I'm Deanne Mazzocchi, and if you want to learn more about what's going on in Springfield, visit repmazzocchi.com. That's repmazzocchi.com.
This is State Representative Ryan Spain, and I've just finished watching the governor's annual budget address. Unfortunately, Governor Pritzker has no credibility on budget issues for the state of Illinois. If you remember, just 2 years ago, the governor demanded that we pass his massive income tax increase, or if not, he would deliver huge spending cuts to key services throughout the state of Illinois. Voters overwhelmingly rejected this tax increase because his claims were untrue and more taxes were unnecessary. Today, Governor Pritzker presented an inflation budget that spends billions more than last year, but does little to tackle key issues like rising crime. Inflation budgets are good for governments, but they are bad for people. Our families are paying exorbitant prices for the goods that they need, which leads to more government tax revenue. If Governor Pritzker wants to take credit for this budget, he must also take responsibility for the massive inflation we're seeing in Illinois today.
But keep in mind that this is the same person who just a year and a half ago was spending a fortune of his own money trying to convince Illinois voters to approve a $3 billion tax increase. And he followed that up by proposing over $1 billion in tax increases on Illinois businesses. Governor Pritzker at his core supports increased taxes, higher government spending, and has used an avalanche of cash from the federal government to bail out budgets year after year. What we need to address are some of the driving pressures that have continued to make our state budgeting a challenge, and we need common sense bipartisan solutions to come together to put Illinois on a more stable financial footing for years to come.
I call it one word, the gimmick speech. The governor shared with us basically in the state of Illinois what his plan is to try to get reelected. And so the first part of the speech, I did appreciate him recognizing our first responders and those educators and the nurses and those people in the health care field that have been working to provide care for those in need in this pandemic. But the real thing today is him talking about his proposed FY23 budget, which is $45 billion. We thought last year's budget was up, but this time he doesn't talk about the $2.5 billion in increased spending, but the $460 million in decreased revenue that's going to come in. So how will that affect us as constituents throughout the state? What eventually is going to happen is increased taxes. It's going to hurt the businessman. And so he talked about some foo-foo things that would help out for the short range, trying to get some attention so he can do one thing, and that is run his campaign. But today it's about crime, corruption, and the cost of living. And the most important thing that people are talking about in my district is crime. What are we doing to address that? It's nice that we're going to have more Illinois state policemen on the roads, but how about the local policemen, the local sheriff's departments? What are we doing to fund them? I appreciate the opportunity to have body cams, but we need to fund police. We need to fund so we can have safer districts, safer areas. That's what the concern is. And so again, I call it the gimmick speech today. The most important thing people need to know that we're concerned about, not just for today, but down the road. What are we doing? When as one of the other fellow legislators today said, when the Biden bucks are over, what are we going to do then to fill the goals and to fill the holes and the gaps in the state of Illinois? So today, again, governor's speech was a gimmick. Let's work together for the state of Illinois. Let's be realistic. The House and Senate Democrats have got to realize that today's speech is not the answer for the state of Illinois. I hope they don't vote for that. What I want them to do is work with us on our side of the aisle to come up with true answers to address the concerns and the opportunities we have for the state of Illinois. So today was a gimmick, but I tell you what's going on in my district is people want real answers, and that's what we're going to work for.
We would not have a budget surplus today without three major areas of revenue. Number one, sales tax from inflated retail products. Cars are at 40% above their normal cost. Building products are twice and 3 times their normal cost. Number two, $8.1 billion federal dollars used to balance the budget. 3, federal aid payments to keep unemployment benefits going. They're paid, creating more retail sales at inflated prices, and therefore higher taxes are paid. Even with the extra tax revenue, we are still lower in our state revenue. We need real long-lasting solutions, not short-term fixes. Last year, we still had 115,000 people leave our great state. That's not because our state is the tax-friendly, business-friendly state that our governor has painted.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.